Hello all, I hope you are well in these extraordinary times. I'd like to welcome you all to the Fintech Finance virtual arena where we are hosting you today. In this special arena, we are going to be discussing payments as a service. Joining me today, all the way from London, we have Ciaran Chu from ACI Worldwide. How are you doing today, Ciaran? Are you enjoying lockdown?
Loving lockdown, Ali. Thanks for having us. As you can see, I desperately need a haircut, but other than that, I'm putting a shirt on for the first time in 2 months. All is going well.
Excellent. I am looking forward to the seeing all the hairstyles as people kind of leave. There was trending on Twitter, which was bring back the shave a couple of days ago.
Yeah, although I think when you got a hairline like mine, shaving it all off, it might take a long time if ever to go back. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, I want to look at payments as a service because it's something where there's a lot of opportunity for elements like financial inclusion, but there's also a lot of opportunity on the fraud side of things as well. So looking first of all from a merchant's perspective, if you want to integrate payments into your platform, into your e-commerce, into your store or whatever it may be, traditionally you would have to do this a lot of it yourself. It could be very expensive, requires a lot of hardware, a lot of software. What does payments as a service bring to these suppliers?
Well, I think to your point there, payments as a service is not a new phenomenon when you're looking at the merchant e-commerce gateway, where you've had merchants who are desperate to convert as many transactions as possible. And to do that, they want to obviously connect to the most amount of payment endpoints, which are obviously classically stored in a cloud. So that's not a new phenomenon. I think where we're really seeing the shift, probably more broadly beyond that merchant space, is into your core banking and your payments capabilities. And ultimately, whether you're a merchant or whether you're a bank or an intermediary who sits behind the merchant, in the past you've had to worry about high volume, high resilience, and obviously security. Which had kind of meant that as a consequence you had a big overhead to actually run and maintain your systems, and it probably took you as much if not more effort and cost to actually maintain as opposed to it did actually bringing out new capabilities and features. So the consequence of that, and I think I'm not telling anyone anything that they don't already know, is that a lot of the fintechs or cloud native providers have come in and actually zoomed straight in and said, okay, we'll make it really simple for you. We'll offer it for you as a consumable model, and as a consequence of that, you can get on with running your business. I think the big shift that we're probably seeing now, that's been accelerated from a COVID standpoint, is the fact that not only do banks understand the fact that the security in the cloud is enhanced and increased, and if in many cases up to, if not beyond their data center levels, but the fact now is that they're actually looking at their operating models, and that's given them an opportunity to reassess where they are and actually make it more simplistic for their end customers to consume their services, whether they be fraud, core banking, or indeed the merchant capabilities as well, not to mention your payment piece. So that's probably the big shift that I think we're undergoing now.
Absolutely. I think it also enables scalability. I mean, looking at just as an example, B&Q took forever to get on their website, and their demand must have shot right up through and they didn't have the capabilities to do that. So now, by using cloud, by using services as a platform, enables you to scale up and down as needed.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be something that's probably in the conversations that we have with our clients and prospects. A lot of them are kind of, they're sold on the elasticity of the service, and then you go through the buzzwords like containers and elastic scalability and DevOps, to name but three. I think the big piece is, and this is where I think the payments as a service piece really taps into it, is it's not necessarily the technical pieces that people were already sold upon and you could get as infrastructure as a service. I think it's more the actual overlay service to without kind of using that service as a buzzword. I think it's more around how do you actually ensure that clients are not having to maintain all of the operating components around the actual core technology. That I think in the past has been something that's been an oversight, but actually takes up an awful lot of time, and it's something that clients, whether they be banks or intermediaries or merchants, want to kind of get away from, so they can actually focus on, to your point, selling more paintbrushes, pots, or everything else as people come out of lockdown.
Exactly. Well, we've got to talk about fraud on this. The way that I see it is there's kind of two elements of that. The first is on the almost low tech end is people trying to say, oh, I paid for that and get stuff for free. What's the advantage of being as a service in on the low fraud end?
So I think if you look at the fraud arena, fraud solutions in the cloud are not a new concept, purely because of the fact that the more data that you can actually get access to, the more opportunity you've got to actually not only stop fraud but also negate the false positives, which is a massive issue and continues to be as there's more of a shift to online channels. I think the big thing that we're really seeing with our partnership, particularly with Microsoft, is the fact that we're able to plug in our capabilities into the native Microsoft services that maybe go around our core payment and fraud application, and that means that users have a end-to-end holistic way to monitor not only their traditional card payments but also their real-time payments in a scalable environment where they can scale up and scale down. And I think that really is a game changer. And we are actually, funnily enough, this week going to be launching a service where we're actually positioning our fraud solution in the cloud as a full managed payments as a service offering.
I want to break that down a wee bit. Okay, so you got the Microsoft platform, you got Dynamics, you got all sorts of platforms there that you're using, and then of course then there's how does this actual integration, what does that mean for the bank, for the merchant, for the intermediary? What does it actually mean on their operating costs, but the people using the software? Does it mean that they have it as one window? On a kind of micro level, what are we talking here?
So I think from a usability standpoint, the way that we're positioning it is this is not going to be a just click and you're kind of on your own sort of scenario, because I think some of the value that ACI brings, given our depth of fraud expertise, is actually providing business support. So one of the capabilities that we are offering is what we call rule consultancy, where we'll actually have dedicated expertise within ACI who will support clients in actually evolving their rules and actually then plugging in their business processes to the solution so that they can actually manage it more effectively. So that's on the business side. I think the second component that we've also got is around integration to some of the things like you said there, Dynamics 365 and some of the other capabilities. We did actually launch a partnership demo with Microsoft earlier this year, where if you go into the Microsoft Tech Centers, there is a financial crime demo which leverages the ACI fraud application and shows it orchestrating with the Microsoft surrounding toolkit. And then I think more at a technical level, obviously under the covers, but nevertheless important, we've also got the database as a service native within Azure, which ensures that clients can actually scale up and scale down, to your point, as needed. And where there are extremely high volumes, regions such as India or Brazil, where there's a big real-time capability, it's crucial that that solution performs at a very, very high transaction throughput, as well as being able to back off, where there might be kind of batch windows as well. So the technical infrastructure that's been built out as well helps ensure that it does elastically scale, and ultimately then it means that clients can actually focus on protecting their business, knowing that they're doing it at a optimal cost point. They're not overpaying for their CPU and resources, and they also have the support of the ACI staff who are experts in the application and the actual industry insight to ensure that the rules that are being put in place are not just kind of bespoke to one bank. If we've got 3 or 4 other institutions elsewhere who are doing it slightly different and can maybe benefit from a more holistic approach. So I think that's a real differentiation, because it's the expertise over the top.
I think that consultancy approach when installing anything or anything at all is definitely the way forward. The amount of times I've heard of various organisations and they just get people on the system and then they have their what's it called, the maintenance cost, and it just creeps up and creeps up and creeps up. Having that consultancy, if you're using software well, fantastic.
And I think on that piece, one of the big things that we see, particularly given the number of tier 1 institutions and established banks and intermediaries that we actually support, and even merchants, the fact is that often it's not a greenfield site. So obviously one of the big needs around fraud, and you're seeing more and more fraud obviously with the shift to online channels and the impact of COVID-19, is the fact that you want to obviously orchestrate as much data as possible. So what that obviously means as well is it's not a kind of one and done or a one size fits all for cloud deployment. What you want to really ensure is that you're still leveraging the best pieces of your on-premise operation, and you transition that away so you can actually then grow your business out and actually focus on transformation, as opposed to getting involved in say a big migration, or alternatively setting up a new solution in the cloud and then thinking, oh, am I just going to spend the next 18 months recreating a lot of what I had on premise? So I think that kind of hybrid transformational approach is really, really important because it ensures that clients unlock value at every step of the way, whether that's faster time to market, reduction in cost, and being able to kind of launch more surrounding services which help them differentiate themselves in an ever commoditized market.
Absolutely. With that in mind, staying on the fraud, there was a fantastic report from our friends at the Emerging Payments Association, and it was looking at the amount of e-money licenses, banking as a service that's available out there, and the opportunity for people to effectively set up fraudulent organisations at a much higher level. What's the danger there, and how do you mitigate against that?
I think from a market entrant standpoint, I think one of the things that's always going to happen, right, with the regulatory agenda is that as competition is kind of encouraged through lowering the cost of entry through things like cloud native services, there is always going to be a kind of element that will kind of abuse it, as you see with any sort of industry. I think the big piece is obviously ensuring that you speak to experienced expertise, and I think that's where the established fraud providers such as ACI, such as Microsoft, Amazon and the other large cloud providers, and the traditional payments vendors, I think that's really going to be where we kind of earn our coin, because we've got the expertise from having done it for the last however many years, and ultimately can bring that expertise in to make sure that it's being operated in a more effective manner. And I think also the rise to marketplace deployment, and actually ensuring that it's a one size fits all model, as you can see with the marketplace that we deal with in a consumer life. That's really going to then ensure that the technology that you're using is actually legitimate, and it's not fraudulent, and therefore you don't hear of all of these kind of scams and setups that are being done around the site. But I think that's something that we are continuing to monitor and really kind of get our voices heard on, because it is something that's just going to keep growing.
Cool. Well, looking at payments as a service as a whole, obviously the back end is kind of only one element of it. You also then have all of the various e-wallets, but then also the regional e-wallets, and there doesn't seem to be one payment provider, one e-wallet to rule them all. You have regional ones like Yandex in Russia, you've got Ali and We in China, you've got PayPal in the West. What's the advantages of there not being a sort of single wallet to rule them all?
I think the thing that obviously consumers are highly protective of is the ubiquity in that local market. And I think ultimately that there are so many different phenomenons out there where you try to get that kind of one universal wallet, and top of wallet is a big buzzword, and we've gone through the whole beacons to try and get you to use their wallet phenomenon. I think that the big thing is it's not necessarily about having one wallet to rule them all. What the differentiator is really going to be is how easy is it to actually plug in the capability, and actually then ensure that you operate it in a simplistic manner. Because I think as long as you can do that and actually make it simple for your consumers, there isn't going to be a one size fits all. I think the other piece that we're really trying to focus on is how do we ensure that we're educating our customers on the optimal way to run their business, because I think for so long we've probably been focused very much on being the best software provider, and then often people are looking for us for consultancy and help and guidance in that way. So having things like being able to articulate the major payment wallets in a certain marketplace, and therefore ensuring that they're off the truck, means that you're not necessarily having 100, say, payment types that you've got to maintain. It's very much focusing on the things that are actually going to drive your most growth and do it at an effective margin.
To throw a lot of buzzwords, but they're buzzwords for a reason. Do you think that providing elements like payments as a service, as a platform, do you think that's something that's going to make obsolescence obsolete and future-proof, so that we never end up in the same situation where I've heard stories of certain tier 1 banks still relying on systems from the 70s, still having various elements on 5.25-inch floppy disks. Do you think that everything being provided over the cloud is a way to cut that all off?
I think it's definitely a way to evolve. Okay, will we ever end up in the scenario of 5-inch floppy disks? No, but I would not be surprised. I think it was a quote I was reading the other day from Justin Trudeau, who said that the pace of change is never going to be as fast or as slow ever again. And I think the speed of technology means that cloud deployment is definitely the way forward. I think the key piece to actually answer your question, and I think this is really where the kind of tier 1 solution that Microsoft and ACI with our heritages bring, is the fact that we're actually very versed in evolving those offerings for those tier 1 solutions, so we can actually ensure that we're still maintaining their operational compliance, but actually looking to make that as efficient as possible, and then overlay all of the technology advancements that we've talked about with Kubernetes containerization into a single service wrapper that ensures then that those banks and institutions can actually move away from their high level of maintenance, and actually then focus upon being banks and actually underpinning and underscoring the fact that they are the trusted provider of choice for their consumers, but they've maybe not been able to spend as much time launching new solutions. So by us kind of taking on more and more of that burden and the operational expertise from an infrastructure standpoint, that obviously then allows them to focus on the customers, and then they're not worrying about is my big 5-inch floppy disk stopping me actually being able to launch new solutions. So that's really the value proposition, I think, of not that the tech piece is unimportant, but it's if you're a consumer on the street, as long as your capability is secure, what you really care about is how good the customer experience is. And I think that's the piece that cloud really allows the banks to focus on.
Absolutely. And you hear I think about 80% of banks' IT costs goes on maintaining current infrastructure. So if you can get that down, well, all of a sudden you have a lot more wiggle room to compete on price, to then go, we can focus more on customer, but also then focus more on innovation and preparing for the next 10 years.
And that's the big thing, I think, given the explosion of the fintech market in the last 10 years, I think the big piece and the thing I think I'm most surprised on is when you go to speak to banks, the cost component is not the key driver. It is absolutely based around the innovation and the time to market. And I think a lot of that is focused on how do they partner more effectively with those new fintech entrants, and that's the thing that's going to be a real differentiator. I think, from a recent study we ran with Ovum, we had 1,200 C-level banks and financial intermediary executives, and they were all, I think 93% of them were saying that they were sold on cloud computing, and 84% of them, because the next question is obviously, well, are you just talking about emails? And 84% of them were actually saying that no, it is mission critical and we do want to move it in the next 12 months. And I think the key kind of challenge for ACI then is how do we ensure that we provide a seamless path to unlock value from a revenue standpoint and optimize their footprint so that they're freed up to then, another 40 years of success with us.
Absolutely. You mentioned as well on the core banking side of things. On that side, a lot of new entrants into the market. You've got the likes of Thought Machine and Mambu, all completely cloud native, and then the more established like your Temenoses, Microsoft as well, moving completely to the cloud. I think if you're having a core platform that's not in the cloud at the moment, it makes it a lot harder to then play with all the other fintechs.
And that's what you just said there, Ali, is the key point, because I think the core banking platform is maybe the market is a little bit further evolved versus the payment market from a marketplace standpoint. But I think the futures we look back and say 3 to 5 years will definitely be around how do you consume those solutions. You've got your core payments, you've got your immediate payments, your card, your alternative payments, all in a single marketplace, probably underpinned with a fraud solution, so that it's just very much, you know, API consumed, and you don't really care what the next new thing is because you've got your infrastructure that just allows you to plug and play.
And probably be a lot braver as well and experiment with some new things that you can just plug in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, because the one thing you don't know, and it kind of comes back to the conversation around the payment types, you know, the big thing that is driving the market is, how do I ensure that my customers aren't missing out? Because that's going to be what keeps me relevant. So I think the different business models where, you know, in the past you'd have had somebody like a tier one or even a tier two bank, and they're saying, okay, well, I've got my bank core architecture, or I've got my payments architecture, and I've got my fraud solution. Ultimately, the way the world is moving is very much, it's just, you know, banking as a service as much as payments as a service, and it just needs to be, you know, a simple plug and play. Let the experts get on with actually operating it, and then the banks and the consumer advocates are the ones who actually just focus on bringing up the new components in the marketplace, as opposed to maintaining all of that complexity that hides under the surface.
The last thing I want to look at, what should banks as a whole be looking for in its payments endgame? Is there a point where they're aiming to get towards, and what are some of the flag points to get to there? So
yes, absolutely. I think the big thing that I'm seeing at the moment, and I think this will be something to watch certainly in the next 6 to 12 months, is around the operational capabilities. So I think the actual architectural vision is a well-trodden one, where you've got containerized solutions that are just consumed via open APIs with a low-cost database that allows you to scale up and back as needed, and can be plugged into surrounding services. So I think that architectural journey is well kind of flag posted. How you get to that component, you know, is the age-old adage of you know, breaking your solutions down, ensuring that you're leveraging all of the native capabilities of clouds in general. And the key thing I think you need to ensure there is you don't get locked into a specific cloud. Okay, from a personal standpoint, I think that, you know, the regulatory advisory that you're going to see in the next few years is going to want the ability to move between clouds seamlessly. And that's really where I think, to your point, the big evolutionary piece is going to come in now, which is that operational maturity. So how do you actually ensure that your operating procedures are agile enough to operate within a cloud environment? Because before, you'd have, you know, maybe wanted to release every 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks in an on-premise environment if you were lucky. In the cloud, it needs to be kind of, you know, every hour, every day, if you're seeing kind of feedback from your customers that there's a change to be made. So I think that's the big piece, and how you actually go about that, I think, is, you know, an end-to-end operational review, focusing on maybe a few key use cases where you can actually unlock value, and then look to build out that wider architecture from an operational standpoint. And that really has to fit hand in hand with your tech architecture, because otherwise you're going to end up in a scenario where you see a lot of banks where they're kind of sold on the tech, and then they realize it's too expensive to maybe run because of all the operational stuff that they hadn't thought about at the same time.
Well, thank you very much for that. Where's best to connect with you? Where can we find out more about yourself?
So no, I'm available on LinkedIn. We've also got our ACI homepage. So yeah, I think the big thing is we're really keen to kind of drive and talk to our customers and prospects who are on this journey. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us and have the conversation.
Brilliant, excellent.
Thank you very much.